Zoom record. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Comic Arts Workshop. My name is Ramon Gill. I am the organizer. We've been doing this since, I think, 2017. We used to do it in person, but then COVID happened, and now we do it online, which is kind of cool because then we get to have guests who aren't necessarily local. And we also have and attendees who aren't necessarily local. So it works out. We do give the option of when it's somebody local, we always ask them if they want to do a live in person, meet up, or if they want to do Zoom. So we get both. But obviously some folks are someplace else, like Barbara's is zooming in from California. So I guess our only choice right now would be to do a Zoom. So anyways, today we have Barbara Dillon, who is the editor-in-chief of Fanbase Press. A couple of weeks ago, we had Sebastian, who is the author of Quince.
15, yes.
That's right. And he spoke very highly of Fanbase Press and Barbara. And so I thought we should get her in here. So here she is. I will let her introduce herself. Everybody, please give a nice round of applause to Barbara.
Oh, thank you so much, Ramon. Thank you for the very generous invite and the opportunity to chat with all of your listeners. It's just a pleasure to be here. So as you noted, I am the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Fanbase Press. We have been around for almost 15 years. Next year is 15 for us, and we are both a comic book publisher as well as a media outlet. We are more of a boutique publisher, given that we are a small operation. We can only put out so many books per year, but we still very much want to lift up as many voices as possible, especially those of marginalized creators and marginalized stories. So we do that through our media outlet, by which we do daily reviews, interviews, podcasts, panel programming, and we try to do it as accessibly, excuse me, as possible through virtual events like this one. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and yeah,
And
happy
how
to
did you
share
get
things.
into comics originally?
Say that again.
How did you get into comics originally?
A great question. So I grew up in sort of a mom and pop convenience store. So my first connection to comics was the old spinner rack. And we had a very limited amount of comics. We had, I think, Archie, maybe some Barbie Mattel comics, and very random issues of X-Men. So it was very hard to kind of follow along with the story because they weren't in a sequential order. But I lost touch with comics for a while there until college, which my then boyfriend, now husband, introduced me to Preacher and Watchmen, and my mind was just blown open about, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that there was so much more, that there were so many genres and so many different stories that were available to me through comics.
Got it. Now, going back quickly to Fanbase, one of the things that Sebastian mentioned when we were interviewing him was that you were able to do a fair amount of marketing for him and his book, which is not always the case with small publishers and independent publishers. So tell me, how many staff do you have, or how big is the company?
Well, when it comes to publishing, two. We have two people on staff. It's just my partner and I, which is my husband, Bryant. And he is, the other co-founder with me. But I think what is unique about us, even though we are such a small operation, is that we are very selective about the specific books that we take on to publish, as well as the number of books. Generally speaking, we're only working on one, possibly two projects at a time. We have only one release per year. And the reason is exactly what you mentioned. We are with a project through the entire life cycle. So, however it may be submitted to us, whether, we've had projects be submitted as a concept, nothing really on paper, to scripts that need to be adapted, and nearly full projects as well, or nearly complete projects. And so for us, it starts there and goes through development, production, printing, distribution. We are on site at every convention that we go to sell, to market. So we're with the book for its entire existence. So I know sometimes it can be hard with publishers, they're with the book 6 weeks, after it releases, and then the marketing kind of dies out. that's not for us. We value the creative time and energy that it took for a creator or creators to put into the book. So we will market that book forever. That's just what we do.
Got it. Um, one of my regular questions is the career steps to get where you are, but because you are the founder, I kind of want to tweak that question a little bit, right? So at what point or what led you to decide to be a publisher? Because you go from liking comics out of your father's convenience store, and then you're an editor-in-chief and founder of a comic publishing company. I mean, did you I've you hear a lot from a lot of independent publishers, all the challenges that they have. And there are a lot of challenges and obstacles to running a independent comic book publishing company. So, what made you decide to go this route?
That's a wonderful question. Like many folks in the comic book industry, I have had a very circuitous path that led me to comics, that led me to Fanbase Press. And honestly, it started when I was young. My older brother is an actor and a writer, and most of my childhood was spent going and sitting while he was in acting classes, or sitting backstage when he was in a show. And I met so many talented creative people that one of my passions in life became wanting to help those people, creative people in general, no matter the medium, to be able to do what they love. So I actually, after college, I went to law school here in Los Angeles because I wanted to work in entertainment, and I thought that I really needed the education of contracts and negotiations. Cut to, I actually got an amazing job opportunity where I had interned here in LA for a big time talent management and production agency. And so I worked for them for a few years with leading comedic talent like Jim Carrey, Will Ferrell, excuse me. And I got a little bit jaded, I'll be honest, with entertainment and TV and film, because still I saw so many creative people, so many voices that were not getting the opportunity to share their stories. And really, that's where Fanbase Press originated, was wanting to still help creative people, wanting to provide a platform for their voices. And so we started very meekly. We started internally with two stories that we were working on to be graphic novels. But while we were doing that, because it takes so long for the art to be created for a comic book, we started the media side of things because we wanted to build a community. We wanted to build a fan base. And so we started doing reviews. And honestly, we were very fortunate. We got our first interview was with John Bernthal, who at the time, it was the very first season of The Walking Dead. And so he was playing Shane on The Walking Dead. And we just really grew from there. We were so fortunate to do that and to have that opportunity. And that's why the two sides of our company have really been synchronous, because one has benefited the other over the years and has again allowed us to do both things, not only to tell stories through our publishing, but also to provide that platform that we originally wanted, just for highlighting and raising up as many voices as possible.
Yeah, that's a really interesting combination, being a media company as well as a comic book publisher.
Yeah,
But I
absolutely.
feel like one of the other really big advantages is that you have a JD, right?
I do
So,
not. So I actually
oh,
left law school when I got, yes.
okay. But
So
you
I did
studied,
get some very
but you,
helpful education, which has honestly benefited us when doing negotiations and contracts. But yes, I did leave prior to finishing law school to take advantage of that opportunity.
but still, that background is really unique in this industry. Most people who start comic book companies are coming from the creative side, are either
Absolutely.
editors or writers, and one of the things about this industry is there's so many people who are creative that we don't have enough people who have other skills, like hard skills, like business skills. And I think having that law background was probably really a big advantage with having this company. I'm so curious now, what's your husband's background?
So he actually comes from the creative side of things.
Oh,
He
okay.
went to college, yes, for acting, theatrical acting, and came out to be an actor here in Los Angeles. But we both ended up working at the same company in talent management and production. And both of us just have those same values of growing up in theater for both of us, and very differently. There's just, it's very much like comics, because comics is a very small industry. There is not a lot of money in it. So you really have to do it because you're so passionate, because you want to tell those stories. And it's very much the same about theater. Theater is very small. Of course, there's Broadway, there's that sort of thing, but on the other end of the spectrum, it's a lot of independent theater, a lot of independent productions of folks who just really have a story to tell and want it to be out in the world.
I think the fact that you guys have been around for 15 years is quite a testament to how well you guys are doing. I mean, there are comic book companies that launched in the last 5 or 10 years who are gone now, and it's just amazing that you guys are going pretty strong.
Thank
Um,
you.
so we know you have your law background. We know that you stick with a project for much longer than most publishers do. And that you also have the media side of the company, which I'm sure is helps a lot with everything. So what else makes Fanbase Press unique compared to other public publishers?
That's a really great question. I think first and foremost that there are so many wonderful publishers out there, both larger, more traditional, as well as independent. And independent has come to mean a great many, it's a spectrum of sizes. But I think what makes us unique is that we do have a very personal touch. We want to really support and bring to life the vision that the creator or creators have in mind. So that's very important to us. We want to do so in a very high quality manner. We want the books that we put out to last, especially because we have a great many ties and partnerships with the library market, the educational market. So, when a book is in a library, we want it to be able to be checked out multiple times and not fall apart, which is a challenge for librarians. And I think the most interesting thing is that as a small publisher, we have been able to break into both of those markets, educational and library. We have partnerships with Hoopla, which if anyone is in the US and has a library card, Hoopla is the online content that you can access with your library card. And that's not just comics, that's all books, all different kinds of media, audio, visual, etc. So our entire catalog is accessible to anyone with a library card, not only here in the US, but internationally, which enables us to have a greater reach than we could have ever done ourselves. So that's a one way that folks can find us and then come back and if they really like the book, purchase us in print. But we also have a great partnership with Comics Plus through Library Pass, and it's the same thing. It's a wonderful creative access to libraries, to educators, that has really, just bolstered the company and enabled our books to reach so many more people.
Now, because you pay so much attention to a book when you after you publish it, I would imagine that you're very selective and you probably limit the amount of books you publish a year. So about how many books do you publish a year, and what goes into your decision to publish a creator's work?
That's a great question. Honestly, we only do one book a year. There have been some years that we've done two, but generally speaking, we only have one release a year. And the selection process, we were incredibly fortunate. Aside from the first two books that we ever published, everything has been submitted to us. So we're very fortunate in that regard. And what we're really looking for is not a specific medium. It's not a specific story or genre. It's really a story that has very resonating characters and that leaves you thinking about something very important. There are lots of great comics out there that are just fun, purely action or purely X. But for us, it's very, very important that there be a message and not one that has to, beat you over the head with it. But we want something to be left with you that makes you think, that makes you ponder things. And that's because for us, for our 10th anniversary, we had a Stories Matter campaign, which was simply that we acknowledge the universal impact that stories have on all of our lives. They can make us grow. They can make us, acknowledge things about ourselves and process things that would otherwise be too difficult to do, in real time, and just connect with people. I mean, stories have the ability to allow us to connect with others that, may have lived experiences that are far outside of our own than we could ever know. And what a powerful tool to be able to connect with people and to learn and change things about yourselves. So for us, we really keep that idea of stories mattering and how with our own books we can advance that message as well.
Got it. Now, because you're only working on one book a year, I have to ask, what is the process or what happens after you sign on a creator? Now, in traditional publishing, at least with graphic novels, like with prose, they want to see a finished manuscript, right? But with traditional graphic novel publishing, they will usually want to see a pitch and then have a hand in shaping the book.
Mhm.
So would you say it's the same way with a fan base? What is the process of from the time that a creator gets signed on to the time the book is on the shelf?
That's a great question. So it varies a little bit based on every project. First and foremost, our conversations with the creator start with, what is your best working process? Because not every person is the same and, people work differently. So that can be just simply through communication, through the way and the manner with which we follow up with them and the cadence of us following up with them. But yes, absolutely. We very much work with the creative team all throughout the development process, because it's not that we are a publisher that you just send in a book and we publish it. We are very much a part of that process about making the story the best that it can be, but also still remaining very much a part of what the creator or creators have envisioned, because that at the end of the day, this is their story, so we want it to be true to that. But yes, absolutely. We are very much a part of the, if the writing process is still continuing before it goes to an artist, sometimes it may not have an artist attached. So we've helped, locating and finding the best artist for the project, as well as letters, colorists, excuse me, everybody, so we have a hand in every step of the process.
Got it. So it's not so I'm sure it happens, but it can be where the creator's doing everything, or it can be that you're bringing in freelancers to do the lettering, the coloring, the production, things like that.
Absolutely. We just our latest book was Four Color Heroes, which won the GLAAD Award this year. And that was everything was done by Richard Fairgray, who is just a multi-hyphenate, amazingly talented individual, but he did everything. He is the writer, the artist, the colorist, the letterer, everything. So it's unique that we have that opportunity, but it's also a fun new opportunity to work with one person versus, a five-person team or a three-person team. But yes, absolutely. It just differs from project to project.
Let me ask you this, because you and your partner have a background in other media, do you guys actively pursue other opportunities for the properties you do publish with those other media?
Absolutely, we do. We are very fortunate to have connections in TV and film and animation. So absolutely. An important thing to note is that about all of our projects, they are all creator owned, which means that the creator maintains 100% of the rights to the project. We have exclusive publishing rights, but otherwise, if and when a project, goes on to another medium, it is entirely to the benefit of the creator to be able to decide what they want to do, to have that negotiating power. So that's just a very important thing for us, for them to be able to maintain those rights.
Got it. Now, because you're coming into this industry from a completely different background, I have to ask you, people are always saying that, that there's something wrong with the industry, it's broken, or it's dying or whatever. And they keep saying that, right? But, I'm sure there are ways that the industry could be doing business better. Do you have any ideas or thoughts on the topic?
That's a great question. I do, of course. We ourselves, as well as, our colleagues and friends in the industry, are constantly having conversations about, what is occurring, acknowledging the challenging areas in the industry, and also across industries, because I think not only are there areas for change within comics, but with our partnerships with educators, with libraries, because they have their own challenges and barriers that they have to deal with. And I think one of the biggest things is acknowledging that, this isn't limited to just the publishers, the creators, and that's it. Retailers, there's so much changing. I think it's acknowledging that, the demographics of readership are very different. Long gone are the days of it only being, white men being the largest demographic who are only reading superhero comics. my goodness, the breadth of genres of comics is amazing. And so is the diversity of its readership. And so I think you're starting to see comics in terms of content, start to catch up with the diversity of its readership. But, that readership they don't all go to a comic book shop to order comics, they don't all read in print. Some folks do read through their library, or have a subscription to a different person, or they only read comics or zines. And so I think it's learning that so much is changing. I think it's learning that, things like the pre-order model may be really challenging because of that. If you're basing, if you're a retailer and you're basing your ordering numbers on a comic that's not going to come out for months and you have no idea how it's going to do, that's really challenging for their business as well. So I think though the first step is acknowledging that there is change. Things are strained right now for everybody. We simply find ourselves in this world in a very challenging time globally. So acknowledging and having conversations about what can change, I think are the first step.
Okay. Now you're working as an editor-in-chief, but do you have a dream project that either you want to bring in or you want to work on yourself? And by the
Uh,
way, after this question, I'm going to open it up to the rest of the audience for your questions, okay?
Wonderful. Yes, that's a great question. Um, Honestly, I know that we've spoken about it before, my husband and but I would love to really tackle a project that speaks to class struggle because I feel like that's something, we've touched on a little bit in some of our books, but it's not something we've tackled head on. And I think that it would be really interesting to tackle that subject in a thoughtful manner. So, if the right project came our way that tackled that in a meaningful way, I would absolutely want to entertain that.
That's funny. I was just talking to my wife that I would like to do a book about the classes, but in the Philippines where I'm from, because there's a very, very dominant culture of class over there.
Mhm.
Not unlike other cultures out in Asia where there are certain like there's castes and things like
Like
that.
a caste system, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that's also that's just a coincidence because that's also something I want to work on, but from the Philippine perspective. Okay, guys, so let me open it up to the rest of you guys. We now have quite a number of viewers. Does anybody have a question they would like to pose to Barbara? Guys, Char, no question from you. Usually you do.
oh, I got another question.
Sure, but shoot, Char.
How long does it take you to draw a comic page? And do you use traditional or digital art?
Those are two really great questions, Char. I myself am not an artist. You would not want to see my stick figures. They're abysmal. But it really depends on the artist. We have some artists who do prefer traditional artwork. So, pencil, pen, ink. They really prefer that method. And then others do digital. And honestly, we've had a mix of both sometimes. So it really does come down to the creator. And for your other question in terms of speed, likewise, dependent upon the creator. We've worked with some creators for whom comics creation is their full-time job, so they can, dedicate an entire day to illustrating versus, other folks who have to maintain a full-time or part-time job outside of comics and for whom, creating comics is sort of the part-time job or when they have time.
Thanks for that question, Char. Anybody else? Yes, Aisha, go ahead.
Hi, um, I'm fairly new to all the comic side of things. I'm a literary editor. I edit books, so I'm interested in comic editing, and so I'm trying to, learn the ins and outs. What exactly do you look at when you hire a comic book editor?
Great question. So I actually am the editor for all of our books. So we don't hire outside editors. But in terms of editing, first, I salute you for wanting to get into comics editing. That's wonderful. It's very exciting. I love it. For editing myself, it really does start with the story itself. I want to make sure that I'm fully understanding the story that the creator wants to tell. And then, we make sure that even before pen hits paper for the artist or digitally, we really make sure that the story is solid from start to finish, because we want to be thoughtful of the artist as well. But I will add that we equitably see the artist, whether they are work for hire, whether they are an equitable creator, they are very much a storyteller in their own right. So even if the script is done, we're very open to the input from the artist of, how they can adjust the story, how they can make it better. So for us, editing is all throughout. It goes throughout the entire development and production process.
Okay. So, and what about the technical side? What exactly it is that you look at when you're editing something?
Sure. So in terms of the script, we get the script in different formats. Honestly, we have had a lot of folks bring a script to us that's in like a screenplay format. But the interesting thing that I found is it's a sort of a dance, and it's one of the big reasons that we talk to the creator upfront about their communication style and what works best for them. Because sometimes if we have a writer and artist together, the artist may not need a fully broken down, I don't know how familiar you are with a comic book script, but usually it's like broken down by panel. Some writers get really intricate about what they want the panel to look like, what is placed where. But some artists feel a little cramped by that in their creative style and their process. So first and foremost, we want to understand between the two, what is their communication? What does the story need to look like in script form to be able to allow that flexibility to the artist? But yeah, I mean, in terms of technique, with the script, I'm very much looking for a through line through the story. I want to make sure that everything makes sense. I want to make sure that I'm understanding so that I see it on the page. What are the messages? What are the themes? I really want to get into the heads of the creators. And then in terms of art, I'm very much a part of that process, but I also very much rely on my husband and his expertise as the art comes in, because he's been, a writer and an artist himself. And so he has that visual brain that might pick up on things that I may not see since I'm not an artist myself. So I really value his expertise in saying, this could be a little bit different, or this element is not coming through as much as it could. So that's why I really value our collaboration, because we're each bringing our own skill sets to the project.
And you guys are fan-based press. They just do comic books, or do you like do full graphic novels and mangas and all?
We haven't ventured into manga, but we do, generally speaking, we'll do comics and graphic novels. We do some graphic novels that's just, a standalone story. We don't print floppies, but something we have done a lot of recently is if it's an episodic story that's coming out in issues, we release the issues digitally, and then we collect the entire thing into a collected print trade paperback.
Like a volume of the whole thing.
Exactly, yes.
Thanks.
Of course. Thank you for those great questions.
Aisha, I would also suggest if you're on Facebook, there's a whole bunch of comic book creators Facebook groups, and they're always looking for editors to help them out. So, but granted,
Absolutely.
these are usually aspiring or beginner creators, and they sometimes just need help without much funds to pay an editor. But I mean, if you don't have any comic books or graphic novels in your portfolio, it might not be a bad thing to do one or two just so you can have the experience.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you could give me a few referrals, because I'm only in one. I think it's the Comic Editors Alliance or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
But you could, but they're all already those are already full of editors. So just look for
Yeah.
the comic book creators group, and there'll be people there who need help with editing.
Or I'll do that. Thank you. Thank you for the suggestion.
Hey, Barbara, what's the tendency for Fanbase Press? Is it to take on creators with finished books or with pitches and the books still need to be fleshed out?
That's a great question. Generally speaking, I'd say it's predominantly stories that need to be developed. Even if it comes to us as a complete script, I don't know that there's ever been a story that we've been like, great, off to print, done. So yes, and I feel like, it would be quite a feat if we were to get something that's fully finished and we had no thoughts on it whatsoever. But yes, I think my preference is to be able to work with the creator or creators throughout the process.
Thanks. Anybody else have a question? Yes, Peter, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
How do you find new talent, or if somebody, applies, let's say they have a series, they have something they want to pitch to you, how do you vet them? Is there an alleyway through which you, let's say, connect potential artists with writers?
Those are great questions. So we've been super fortunate that the creators we've worked with have all come to us in terms of, if it's a writer or, a group of creators coming to us and pitching. So we've been very fortunate in that regard. In terms of if we need to locate an artist, which we have had to do, it's really differed based on the project, based on the creator. We are lucky that we, over the years, have amassed a number of wonderful colleagues and friends in the industry. So sometimes it can be reaching out to a colleague, a friend, or putting out a general call to those folks saying, hey, we have this project. Would you be available? And it depends on a number of factors. It can depend on what is the budget of the writer in terms of, because they do Fanbase Press puts forward the printing cost, but it is up to the writer or whomever the creator is bringing the project to us to fund the artist if an artist is needed. And so it can depend on the finances, the budget available to that person, who the creator is. But we've also reached out through, kind of like Ramon was talking about, we've reached out to creator groups about just putting out a general call to artists. And we found folks all over the world, which has been really exciting and remarkable, just being able to really expand the breadth of creators that are available and interested.
Thanks, Peter. Anybody else have a question? There's so many people who aren't showing their faces tonight, which is kind of strange. Anybody? Okay, well, I have other questions. Earl, just before we got on, I noticed that you posted I think it was a YouTube video about the Eisner nominations.
Yeah.
Right. And when I found it, I think it's an 8-minute long video, but I only had 3 minutes before I had to come on. So can you give me I guess a little gist or a summary of what the video is about?
Absolutely. So before the pandemic, we used to have a much more in-depth coverage of the Eisner nominations. Our staff on the media side of things would break down every category and give a very brief summary so that, folks who don't have time could refer to that and get a better understanding of all of the Eisner nominees in every category. Cut to the pandemic. Limited resources, folks are, having challenging times. So we changed over to a more virtual and also a more accessible format in that we reached out to creators, we reached out to publishers, retailers, librarians, educators, and we originally we posed 3 questions to everybody. It was something to the effect of, how do the Eisner nominations impact or direct your work? What is the most exciting or interesting nominee to you this year? And why should the general reader be interested in the Eisner nominations or pay attention to the Eisner nominations? And so we put together kind of like if you've ever seen a DVD extra, the bonus features at the end, we put together a video of folks answering, a different video for each one of those questions. And so everybody got a chance to speak to those 3 things. This year, we expanded it a little bit. We have very similar questions to those 3, and we've added I'm trying to bring it to mind. Oh, essentially that, as we were talking about, Ramon, to your question earlier, the industry is changing and evolving. So with that in mind, what would each person recommend to the Eisner Awards to better reflect that, that evolution and that change in the nominations or in the process itself? So that was the fourth question we posed to everybody. So as of this week, we released the first compilation video speaking to how the Eisner nominations director impact the work. And every week leading up to the Eisners, we'll release a new video.
Got it. Okay, I have another question. I know that Sebastian's book, Kinsey, is targeted towards, is it middle grade? I think it's middle grade, right?
I would say so, yes.
Does Fanbase Press have a tendency to publish books for a certain audience?
That's a great question. We honestly try to appeal to everybody. So we try to have something for everyone. So we do have younger, reader books. I would say probably 8 is the youngest demographic for our books, but we have, everything from there all the way on up to adult sci-fi, fantasy, horror, everything. So we try to have as many genres as possible. Going so far as we even have a geeky cross-stitching book, which combines the art of cross-stitch and the science of space exploration. For folks who are unaware or unfamiliar with cross-stitch, we have a stitch camp at the beginning of the book. So we teach you how, and then throughout the book, we've got different patterns for all different experience levels of cross-stitching, but they're all themed to space and space exploration.
Got it. Okay, anybody else have a question? Tyler,
I
did
have one. I
Oh,
have
go
one.
ahead.
So
Yes.
I'm not sure if this was already asked because I came in late, unfortunately. But I've always heard from different sort of publishers that when they're looking to to find like new talent, or for lack of a better term, usually self-publishers would publish their own book, get their own, build up their own sort of fan base, and that would gain the attraction of different companies to wanting to interested in publishing them. I was just curious. I'm not sure if fan base is the same thing. Is there like a certain threshold or like a certain view count, I guess, until someone's book gets your attention and gets you interested in possibly publishing their ideas?
That's a really great question. And I have a multifaceted answer. So the easy answer is no. There is no limit to, we don't have like you have to have this many Instagram followers or anything like that. My goodness, no, we don't have anything like that. I do know, to your point, Peter, that there have been publishers that have those, contractual requirements in their contracts. We are not one of those. And we actually, we do look at and weigh and consider how a creator holds themselves out in the world. For us, this is a partnership that's going to be long lasting. So we want to make sure that will be compatible with one another. And that, if we have this person out there that we are promoting very heavily, we want to make sure that, that there's sort of a morality clause. We want to make sure they're not going to say something that might embarrass or put Fanbase Press in bad light. So that's very important to us. But that being said, we've had creators who are on no social media. They're just not social media users. That's not what they do. They're all about the creativity. And that's okay too. For us, the most important thing is the creative process for them, and that they are bringing this story to life. And, that's why we have built our brand and built the company for so long is, we do the marketing. We're happy to help with that. Of course, it benefits us if there's a creator out there that can spread the word in addition and be complementary to what we do. But it's by no means a requirement. Yeah, so that's, you don't have to have a huge brand or a huge following to work with Fanbase Press.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That spurs me to ask you, how many submissions do you get? And how many, because you only take one a year, right? So
Yes.
what's the ratio?
That is a great question. I have never had to quantify it. Let me give a very brief thought to, I would say we probably get at least 5 a month. So it's, and it will change, I would say that around during and after Comic-Con for those few months, they get more heavy and they're more frequent because we just meet a lot of folks at Comic-Con in San Diego. And so there might be more during that period. But I'd say it's a steady flow of at least 5 a month throughout the year.
Is there like a submissions guidelines on your website?
I just encourage folks to email me and I can have that conversation with them. But generally speaking, what we're looking for is an overall treatment of the story. We want to know that you have the full story from start to finish in mind, even if it's not completely written out. We'd like to see any completed sequential art that you have, but again, it's not a requirement if you haven't found an artist yet. But if you don't have an artist, we love to see just some concept art of, even if you're taking, art from another book, so that we have a vision in mind of, oh, this is what you have in mind, even if it's, art from another book, it gives us a helpful idea of, even when we find an artist, you'd like it to look like X.
Got it. Okay, guys, any other questions? Wow, okay, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
First one, if you don't mind me asking, when you're interviewing a potential artist who you might want to publish, or I'm sorry, writer, what kind of questions do you ask to ensure that they have they know what they're doing and have at least something with completable, or that the idea is fleshed out?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, I think the first step is first, honestly, if I can send them what I had just mentioned in terms of like what we need materials wise, that's kind of the first test. I want to know that if I provide direction and ask you to give me a certain thing, that you can provide that. And some folks don't do that. And that's a good indicator of, what, maybe this might not be the best partnership. But then, of course, it's reading the submission, any materials that they provide us. Is it a solid story? Do they know, what they have in mind? And if it goes further past that, we'll schedule a meeting with my partner and I and the creator or creators to get a sense of them. If it's someone we don't know, if we're completely new to them, and we'll ask around a little bit. And it's why it's important. My biggest thing is to be kind. One of my favorite humans was Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. And so it's really important to me that we maintain that ethos in all of our work. And honestly, it's such a small industry that if you reach out and you talk to some colleagues about like, hey, do you know this person? How are they to work with? Word can get out, word can spread. So, but yeah, those are just some of the things, as we go through the process, if we're really interested in a project, that we'll consider.
Thank you so much. Do you mind if I ask another question on a different topic?
Go ahead, Peter.
It's kind of going around, right? It's kind of a common trend right now. I think DC Comics are actually in hot water a little bit because in one of their Batman issues, allegedly they used some AI art. Now, the thing that people who are, for AI, generally the argument they make is you can get a lot of things, put out very, very quickly using it. I guess do you guys have a way of mitigating that? Do you believe that's kind of the direction it's inevitably going to head in? I'm just curious about your takes, especially for illustration.
That's a great question. And it's something that is really important, Char. I know that you brought it up offline before we got started, but our stance at Fanbase Press is no AI art. It's just not something that we support. That's not something we see as ethical. We support creators. We support their rights in maintaining the rights to their work and the ability to decide what happens with it. We definitely would not sign on to work with an artist to do AI. And I would say, generally speaking, in terms of monitoring that, it is hard. It is definitely hard. I think you made a great point, Peter, in terms of the fact that DC is battling very strict and very rigid timelines, which is something that we simply don't have. We really build out a timeline that is thoughtful of the creators and thoughtful of, their availability, their resources to create art, but also in vetting the artists or artists. We really get to know them and we get to know their artistic process. And so for at least the folks that we've worked with, it would be very shocking if any of them utilized AI art. But, I realize that that's not a foolproof process. I wish there was a way to definitively know that there's not AI art out there, but I think at the level of AI art that it is now, it has a certain look to it that just doesn't match what we generally work on at Fanbase Press, the art that our projects have. So I think it likely would very much stand out if someone was using AI.
And at this point in time, if you're working with somebody over a period of time, you'd be able to tell if they were using AI art or drawing their own stuff.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever decided to go with a creator and after a few weeks or a few months you realize it's not working out? I know you
Yeah.
try to be nice, so I'm wondering what's the limit to that niceness, Barbara?
Well, the important thing that we do is we always generate a contract with every creator that we work with. So there are expectations. I want to say, I don't think we've ever started a project, like fully started a project. There were a few times that we had selected an artist, and then before they really dived in, we realized that it wasn't the best partnership for both, mutually. So I think there may have been early on in the process when we switched to a different artist, but I can't say that ever like midstream that we've ever had to go with a completely different artist.
So there are projects that you bring in wherein you assign the artist.
Sometimes, of course, it would be fully with the approval of the writer, the creator. But we have had some where they've needed assistance. They just don't have the access or the resources to find the artist. So we have very much helped in that regard.
Got it. Okay. So sometimes you do take projects where it's a script only. The writer just brings in a script.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I guess that's good news for some folks. Okay, guys. Questions? Some of you guys usually ask questions, but I'm not hearing from you guys today. Okay, so let me ask this then. What would you say to somebody who also wants to start their own publishing company?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it would be my best advice would be to start small and to start with what they know and what's available to them. I think sometimes what can be challenging is that when folks meet success, or even, if they're just getting started, they can tend to bite off more than they can chew. And I think the most important thing, whether it be for a creator, whether it be for a publisher, an aspiring publisher, is simply to start small, to perfect what they can, and then to grow incrementally from there. Take on a little bit more once you've gotten a hold of and perfected, or at least gotten comfortable with what you're originally working on. Because the last thing you want is to get too big, too fast, and not be able to maintain all of that.
Got it. Okay. So we've actually I've gone through all my questions already. So I'm gonna reverse things a bit, right? Because is there anything you would like to ask these creators?
Absolutely. Is there anyone that would feel comfortable sharing a current project that they're working on? Just because I'd love to hear, the stories that you have to tell.
I do.
Put up the gallery right there. So wait, who said I do?
Me, I did.
Okay, David, go ahead. Raise your hand if you want to answer that question, okay?
So currently, I've been building this idea, this story called Murado the Magnificent. Right now, I am simply working on a 50-page one-shot comic of that because I didn't want to, like you said, bite off more than I can chew. I want to start off small. Simply, the idea is Murado, a magician, is called to exorcise a genie that is haunting a village. And when he faces the genie, he gets the idea of you and me, we can make a business out of you haunting people's houses, and I get hired to exorcise you, and then we can make money off of that. And that's basically the gist of the story. The genie, like trapped in a bottle for centuries, she wants to explore the world and wants to, live. And the Murado wants to live a very rich lifestyle, and they run this scam of doing it. So that's basically the idea.
I love it. I think that sounds fantastic. I think you've got a great hook there. And the fact that, like you mentioned, it's a 50-page, standalone story that could go on, if you wanted it to, but starting small, starting with that one shot is really fantastic. I like it.
Thank you.
David, Peter,
If nobody else wants to before me, okay, cool. So again, my goal with this is to come up with something that is clearly obtainable or that I can make. I'm going for about, I'd say, 120 pages as opposed to 50, which I know I just said obtainable. So would probably necessitate a simpler art style. The idea basically being, I feel like there are not enough comics that concentrate specifically on antagonists, on villains. So this is, let's say, a world in which superheroes are not necessarily extinct, but something happens, some kind of a big generic final crisis in the backdrop that basically killed off the majority of the world's superhero population, right? This essentially leads the world's supervillains to take up arms and run the show. They have everything they've ever wanted. Their nemesis are gone, and they are completely miserable as a consequence. So really, what my goal is to focus on here is a group of these low down schlubs, guys who were like Z-listers before this, trying to pull off a quote unquote job and then gradually getting into a bigger and bigger mess. It is really something that's the opposite of the standard person becomes person accepts responsibility and becomes powerful type of origin story. It's explicitly screw ups who screw up further and further and can drive themselves further. My goal is to really look into something into like the more long-lasting aspects of being a supervillain, of like having all these amazing gifts and essentially squandering them. I know that sounds very cynical, but that's kind of my goal, kind of this very gallows comedy with elements of crime thriller.
That sounds fantastic. Yeah, I will say that I sometimes like the darker stories because, and what I'm already intrigued and I'm already thinking ahead, like, I wonder what the hook is. I wonder what is the turn that's going to happen to be the resolution of this story. But I love those stories. I think for me, sometimes the most interesting are the darkest stories because I like those antagonist stories, but I like the darker stories so long as there's like a kernel of hope that you can take away, because I think sometimes even in the darkest moments, it's the brightest before dawn. But we live in challenging times. These are stories we can more often relate to. So I think that sounds fantastic. Please keep me posted on that.
Thank you. That's absolutely exactly what I'm going for, the kernel hope.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I have one, but
Hi, Tyler.
yeah, hey. I'm actually trying to traditionally publish this one though, but it's a middle grade superhero graphic novel called Captain Console, and it's about a I'm going to try to give the simplest explanation, but it's about a boy who gets video game related superpowers that he uses to stop video game villains from wreaking havoc in our world.
That's super cool. That's very fun. Do you see it? Because in my mind, I'm thinking like it's a series now. Like it can be like three different books. But great to start with the first one. That's super fun. Are you a writer and artist or writer only?
Writer and artist, and yes, I do intend for it to be a series. I
That's what I
I'm
figured.
actually I'm actually mapping out the entire series plot line, but right now I'm trying to get people to read like the story of the plot line for the plot and script for the first one before I start pitching it.
That's fantastic. And what's going to work to your favor is, because it seems very much like this is going to be a series, so I'm super excited to like stay on for every adventure. But yeah, make sure that first book is a standalone, even though it can have tendrils or it can have things that will lead off to different story arcs, just make sure that first one is really solid on its own.
Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely proud of it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have started sharing it with people.
Well, that's
So.
neat. And honestly, that's fantastic. Being able to share with your peers and even sometimes share with people that might be a little bit above, your experience level is really helpful because they'll, sometimes when you look at something over and over and over again, you might miss things. So it's great to be able to get fresh perspective. So you're doing a great thing.
Okay, thank you.
If nobody else has one they'd like to share, I'd like to ask the final questions and then make some announcements. Anybody? No? Okay, so here we go. People were sharing their ideas, it made me wonder, what kind of genres has Fanbase press published? I mean, I've one of the things that I'm always concerned about is this divide between superhero comics and everything else. So it makes me wonder, what Is there a genre that Fanbase prefers or has a tendency to publish more of?
That's a great question. We've tried to really expand the genres that we've done. We started with our first books with horror, but we were very mindful of the fact that, we really don't want to be a horror publisher. We don't want to only be known for that. So what we did is we tried to veer out with our next books in terms of like, these would be complementary to what we already have, but we want it to be outside of that, going in alternate directions. But so far we have done horror, we've done sci-fi, alternate history, we've done fantasy, we have done superhero, but honestly, we've done different genres of superhero stories. I mean, we've done like a slice of life LGBTQ plus story that also had superhero tie-ins. We've done Quince, which is a Latina superhero, but is very like slice of life as well and very realistic. And then we've done graphic medicine, which if folks don't know, graphic medicine is simply the convergence of the fields of medicine and comics. So it's, it can be narrative stories, like a regular fictional story. It can be memoir, someone telling their own experience, and it can be more didactic in terms of, sometimes doctors want to educate their patients or educate people about a specific thing. So it'll be more educational in that regard. And that has been, a super story or a superhero story in and of itself. But we've done, pure action adventure. Yeah, we've really tried to hit everything.
Got it. Okay, well, thank you very much, Barbara. This has been great. Thank you for coming up. Before we leave, I just want to announce that on July 10th, we have Riley Brown, who is an illustrator, and we'll be talking about his work. And on August 22, we have David Booher, who is a writer out in LA, right? So
David's wonderful, and he's worked on some of our books, so he's absolutely wonderful.
I tabled right next to him in Long Beach years ago. It's a very nice guy.
Absolutely. You're going to have a wonderful time.
And one thing that's in the works, but I don't have a date for it yet, is we're going to be I have lined up a comic book retailer, a librarian, and a bookstore owner. And we are going to ask the question is how can we make graphic novels more accessible than they already are? So we just have to find a date that everybody can meet at the same time.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you all of you for your time and for sharing your stories with me. They sound remarkable. I'm super excited, and please reach out and keep me posted on their progress.
Again, Barbara, thank you. And I look forward to meeting you in person next week at the American
Likewise.
Library Association conference. Guys, you really need to get librarians in your corner. So aside from just retailers. So again, let's please give Barbara a nice round of applause as a way of thank you. And thank you all for coming. And Barbara, I'll see you soon. And everybody, thank you and good night.
Thanks, everybody.
This will be posted probably next week on the website.
Wonderful. Thank you. We'll be sure to share and promote it.